Can you survive being transported? That's the question we're going to look at this time on the Sci Fi Show. In the last episode, we started to look at some of the questions that were raised when you consider what is a mind, and I thought it was worth continuing that tonight by examining the question, can you survive being transported? The transporter is a piece of technology that should be familiar to anybody that has watched any of the shows set in the Star Trek universe. This ubiquitous piece of technology that provides a convenient way to move characters between different locations without needing to inconvenience them with the hassle of getting in a shuttlecraft to get down to the surface. But also a piece of technology that can fail in all manner of interesting ways and raise all sorts of interesting questions for us to delve into. Consider some of the most basic questions. What needs to be transported to make transporting successful? What's actually transported? Can you use a transporter to make a clone? And if so, what is the nature of the copies? These are a few questions to consider, and the philosophy of mind features prominently in all of them. Let's consider the first question. What needs to be transported? The obvious answer is the body, but is that obvious? It seems provided your mind survives the transfer, the body's somewhat superfluous to the equation. There have been a few attempts to do teleportation and some success. One interesting and probably relevant one to discuss is the teleportation of quantum information from one ensemble of rubidium atoms to another. If I understand what was done correctly, the quantum state of one set of rubidium atoms was transported over a distance to another set of rubidium atoms. If you can teleport a conscious mind by measuring and transferring the quantum state from one set of atoms to another, say an identical body, then you'd be able to teleport without bothering with moving the physical body around at all. Would this be teleportation? From the perspective of the individual person, what else would it be? Assuming the consciousness could be moved from one body to another like that and back again. So perhaps the body doesn't actually need to be teleported at all, and instead just the mind could be sent. Let's consider the more familiar case, though, of the Star Trek-style transporter that breaks the transportee down into a matter stream, transmits that to the destination, and then reassembles the person. It seems that the person is converted into some sort of stream of pure energy for the transmission process, or something like that, and transmitted at the speed of light. With that style of transporter, what is sufficient to transport to ensure someone arrives at the other end? If you think back to last time, the answer will really depend on what a mind is. If substance dualism is true, especially some non-emergent variety of it, then unless you successfully transport the immaterial substance component of a person, you're going to kill them by moving the merely material component. Perhaps some sort of emergent substance dualism, the body would teleport and then a new soul would form at the destination, presumably killing the original soul, or at least disconnecting it from its body. How this is different from dying is an open question. Perhaps there's an interesting story to be told on such a premise, the story of a man who has been repeatedly teleported, whose soul is ripped from his body each time and continues on in an after-death state, while the body forms a new soul that still retains his memory and personality, essentially creating two individuals with the same set of memories up to the point of teleportation. Each time he's teleported, a new version of him is created and the current one dies and goes to join the other spirits in a post-existence realm. The author Philip Jose Farmer, although not looking at teleportation, explored this sort of an idea of a persistent soul that could be attached from body to body in his Riverworld series of books. Each time a body died, its psychomorph would become detached and then reattached to another copy of its body. The newly integrated person would then wake up on Riverworld to continue this afterlife existence. So what about other theories of mind? The property dualist may have trouble as well. If the mind and the body have different properties, but are made of the same substance, then perhaps teleporting the body may have an unexpected effect on the mind. Consider Stephen King's short story, The Jaunt, in which the teleportation technology works, but that a conscious mind will not survive the trip through a teleporter, because it will perceive the length of its journey as being millions or billions of years, even though the body only takes a fraction of a second to traverse the jaunt. In the story, being conscious while teleported results in being trapped alone with your own thoughts in a limbo-like state, for what is perceived as an enormous length of time, the loneliness and isolation driving the person mad or killing them shortly after they exit the teleporter. It would seem that both substance and most sorts of property dualism could result in an effect like this because the mind is not simply reducible to the functioning of the brain. If we consider some sort of strictly materialist and monistic conception of the mind, then perhaps none of these problems would even be possible. The current state of your mind is reducible to the current state of your brain, then transporting Star Trek style seems to present no great problem. Just transfer the matter from point A to point B, and provided it isn't scrambled and it's restored to the same state in the process, you will have sent the whole person from A to B. There is a question of how much state is important to transfer. Is it just enough to send all the matter and keep the chemistry intact while not worrying about the exact state at a quantum level? Or will that need to be measured and stored as well? At least in Star Trek, this is where the Heisenberg compensators come into play. The exact granularity of what needs to be sent is an open question, but at least if the materialist monists are correct, it should be possible to transport the matter from A to B while preserving the individual sent. But what if we consider the sort of quantum teleportation technology we have today and the materialist monist approach? Suddenly it seems like you might have a pretty serious problem to deal with. When you do quantum teleportation, you aren't actually transmitting the material of the body, just a set of information about its state. You effectively create a copy of the original at the other end. The new individual might believe they are you, but it seems that in reality all you've done is create a copy and destroyed the original. From the point of view of other observers, there's no discernible difference, but perhaps the original person would disagree. The Australian science fiction author Greg Egan, in his anthology Axiomatic, wrote a number of stories about a human life extension technology called the Joule. The Joule was a corruption of the device's name, the Dual, a piece of technology implanted in your brain and designed over time to come to exactly mirror your thinking and thought processes, but to do it in a durable technological package, allowing the person to do away with the squishy and vulnerable organic original. The Joule technology addresses this quantum teleportation question, but from a different angle. In a related way, we have a transfer of mind or transfer of body question that crops up here. If the Joule exactly mirrors your thought processes, is it you? A third-party observer can't tell the difference between organic you and silicon you. For everybody else, the Joule is you. Just like in quantum teleportation, the Joule even thinks it's you. Once they scoop out the fragile bit, it is you from that point forward. But is it? It seems that if I scoop your brain out, that I will kill you, even if there is a backup silicon brain ready to do a perfect emulation of you, even if your friends and family still think you are there, with them. I suppose someone might reasonably ask what's the difference. On a purely materialistic conception of mind, one that allows for no dualism at all, it would seem that whatever is animating your body and acting as you is you. But does it really matter what substrate the personality is running on? It isn't like there's a unique special you in there anyway. It's ultimately just a complex interaction of inputs generating outputs. The processor that handles the input and output doesn't seem to matter. One of Axiomatic's stories dealt with exactly this question, as a person woke up one day to find himself paralyzed and unable to move. Over the course of the story, the protagonist became convinced that the Joule had taken over and is in control of his body. He becomes increasingly desperate to reassert control over his body and take back his life from the device that has taken control, only to discover later in the story that actually he's the Joule and he is out of sync with the host he's supposed to be emulating, and can expect to be reset and readjusted to bring it back in line with the host, effectively killing him. There are a number of other questions of personal identity raised by transporter technology in Star Trek. We get both sides of the coin in two different episodes, Second Chances from the 6th season of Star Trek The Next Generation and Chuvix from the 2nd generation of Star Trek Voyager. In Second Chances, a transporter accident maroons a young Lieutenant Riker on Nevala 4, while at the same time safely transporting him back to the ship. The accident is discovered 8 years later when the Enterprise returns to Nevala 4 to recover some data that was lost on the original mission. In Voyager, a similar transporter accident results in the Vulcan commander Tuvok and the ship's cook Neelix being merged into one being, Chuvix, that has the memories of both characters. In the Next Generation episode, the two Riker characters struggle to differentiate themselves, and ultimately Lieutenant Riker changes his name to Thomas and leaves Starfleet, while in Voyager, After some time, they were able to reverse the transporter accident that created Tuvix, but several months have elapsed by this point, and Tuvix has essentially become his own individual person, and not simply some freak transporter accident. Tuvix is rightly distressed at the prospect of being killed, so that Tuvok and Neelix can be separated out from him. Is it murder to reverse the transporter accident and restore Neelix and Tuvok? Or would it be murder to allow Tuvix to live, knowing you can restore the two separate individuals to life? Also in Tuvix, one person or two. He was two people at one point in the past, and it could be said that both inhabit the one form now, although the consciousness that has been created is unique. Likewise, with the two different Rikers, could you kill one, and if so, which one? Is there an original Riker, or could they both equally claim to be Riker? And what do these two thought experiments tell us about the nature of consciousness? If it can be so easily copied or integrated, is there a unique mind there at all? Perhaps the extremely reductionist materialists are correct after all. It seems transporters and teleportation present some interesting thought experiments into the nature of mind. Let's hope, if we ever do develop the technology, it isn't silently murdering the users. You can find more information on the different ideas contained in this episode in the show notes on scifishow.com. I can be reached with comments via thescipishow@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment in the show notes at scifishow.com, and you can also leave comments on our Facebook page, facebook.com/scifishow. You can also follow the show via The Sci-Fi Show on Twitter. Don't forget, Phi is with a PH. If there's a topic you'd like me to look into, please don't hesitate to ask. Let me know what you think. Sci-Fi Show is recorded under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 3.0 license, and the music is provided by Maniacal M and Furious J.